malaria is still the number one killer in Africa.
Wow.
They're pushing for the vaccines now, the new malaria vaccines.
Yeah.
So we'll stop malaria at the person, but malaria is still there. So the first person that doesn't have that is going to start getting it again. Why don't we work on the source and get rid of the malaria? Get rid of the problem. It's doable. It's been done throughout the world. I mean, there's countries that have had malaria for hundreds of years and they don't have it anymore. So we could do the same thing. It's just going to take a lot of work, a lot of coordination, a lot of collaboration. There is a hospital in Nigeria that they're growing mosquitoes under the hospital in the tunnels because they're flooded with water. You can't treat a pest unless you know what the pest is. You really can't do mosquito control with a drone until you learn how to do mosquito control on the ground. So
speaking, I feel like if you can keep them out, they would not find their way in. And
keep them outside and get rid of the breeding sources, and you'll start eliminating the mosquito. Get rid of the mosquito, the malaria goes away. Get rid of malaria in 2012. We're going to get rid of malaria in 2018. We're going to get rid of malaria in 2020. We're going to get rid of malaria in 2026. Every year,
it's 2030.
Yeah, it's like every couple of years is like no more malaria by 2024. So if we're going to say no more malaria by 2030, then let's come up with a plan of no malaria by 2030. Mm-hmm. And on paper, it looks great. Yes, let's. But you have to have a plan that's actually sustainable and achievable. To me, they have an idea. Great idea. Let's get rid of malaria by 2030. Fine. Let's give us a goal of getting rid of that. But we need to have some plans on what to do that, because bringing bed nets in every week to different neighborhoods is not going to get rid of it. We've proved it. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results.
All right. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whatever state, whatever city, whatever country that you are listening to me from. My name is Shofu Babalola Theophilus, and this is another wonderful episode of the PestXperience Show. The PestXperience Show cut across different states, across different cities, across different country. And this is a show where we answer several questions, where we bring experts across different states, across different city, across different country, where we talk about frequently asked questions, best pest management practices, best solution in solving pest management issues across different states, across different city, across different country. Now, this is another wonderful episode of the PestXperience Show. And tonight, as usual, I'm not doing it all alone by myself, but I have an amazing guest who is not just an experienced person, a mentor, a leader, but also a renowned professional in the pest management industry. I have with me right here Mr. Edward Horvath. He's a renowned mosquito ecologist and also a renowned pest control professional and a consultant. Mr. Edward Horvath is a vector control specialist with more than 2 decades of experience in public health and vector-borne disease prevention. Since beginning his work in 1999, he has focused on protecting communities from diseases transmitted by mosquitoes and other vectors. His work spans both private industry and government programs, where he has contributed to surveillance, control, and operations, and the development of effective strategies to reduce vector-borne diseases risks. Mr. Horvath has worked across the United States as well as internationally in Africa and Asia, gaining extensive experience in diverse environmental and public health settings. In addition to his field operations and program development, he is committed to education and professional development within the industry. His work includes public education on vector-borne diseases prevention, as well as training pest and vector control professionals, helping develop standard operating procedures and best practices that strengthen operational effectiveness and public health outcomes. Right now, tonight, I have one and only the director of Three Rivers Mosquito and Vector Control, USA. right on the Pest Experience Show tonight. Thank you very much, Mr. Edward, for joining on tonight's show of the Pest Experience Show. And tonight we're going to be talking about innovative and integrated pest management strategies, focusing on vector control beyond spraying. Thank you very much, Mr. Edward, for joining the show tonight. It's going to be a wonderful night. Um, it's my greatest pleasure to have you right directly from the USA, speaking to the global world and global audience of the Pest Experience Show tonight. And I'm very certain. Usually, I say something that every persons who are going to be listening or who are watching us right now on YouTube should always have a jotter, have a designated jotter for Pest Experience Show, because it's experience. You want to actually jot what these leaders, mentors have gathered over the years in just 1 hour. So you have to grab as much as you can, right? So get a jotter for Pest Experience Show. Thank you very much, Mr. Edward, once again. I'm going to start the show with one major question. For those who literally have never, or probably someone who is not, the idea of Pest Experience Show is not just for pest control operator, but also for homeowners who are interested in understanding and knowing what public health pest management is all about, really. So we're going to start with vector. Professionals will say vector control, vector management. What exactly are called vectors?
Thanks for having me this morning. So vectors is any organism that causes a disease. So when you have an insect that could transmit a disease, it's also known as a vector. Some insects out there don't transmit disease, like termites. We're not calling them vectors, but a mosquito, they transmit malaria and dengue and other diseases, and so we call that a vector. So we focus on vector control. We don't focus on like termites. Termites are important because they affect your house, but they don't really affect the health. So a vector is something that would affect human health.
Amazing. You've been in the industry for 2 decades, that's 20 years. And I've seen most people actually say that niching down in the industry sometimes is not a very good idea. But you are basically, in fact, your company name is actually 3 Rivers Mosquito and Vector Control. So it's just you're just in that niche, right? So why exactly did you choose mosquito? I have a leader. Before we dive in, I have a mentor or a leader in the industry who has spent over 40 years in the industry, and he usually says something that mosquito control, he literally doesn't take mosquito control jobs. And seeing you focusing on that particular pest issue, which is mosquito, and you've done this 20 years, that's a lot. How are you doing it? Why exactly do you even choose mosquito vector control itself?
Well, I got into mosquito control back in 20 years ago when I was working in the health field. I was working in nursing and going to medical school, and I decided I didn't want to work in a hospital, but still wanted to help people. One of my projects during my graduate school was West Nile virus, and I got very interested in it.
Wow.
For a while there, I was working for the government, working for county governments. Worked in a few different states: Oregon, Colorado, and Florida, and decided, hey, this is something that could help the world out, still make a good living, and do something I like. And that's why I got into this.
Wow. And mosquito is a very big problem because there are so many African countries that has not gained control over mosquito. Nigeria is key major part, and it's killing a lot of people even till date. There are some people that have actually even died from malaria cases even till just this today alone, right? And it's a major problem.
But mosquitoes still kill more people in the world than anything else. More than wars, more than car accidents. Mosquitoes kill more people in the world, and malaria is still the #1 killer in Africa.
Wow. And in terms of solving malaria problem, a lot of things has been done. You said something before we started the show, which is the fact that the government is doing their thing. The pest control operators are also doing their own part. Homeowners are doing their own parts, but there is no collaboration. I want us to actually delve into that part before we now move into control. What are the control methods? Because we can't talk about control knowing fully well that some other people have actually tried controlling before, but there is a major problem, which is collaborating. in controlling this pest. So before we talk about controlling mosquito itself, I think we should first address the key problem that is actually affecting solving the problem properly, which is collaboration.
Sure,
Yes. So
sure.
what's
So
your
right
take on
now we
that?
have Well, we have different agencies, especially in Africa, that are doing mosquito control or malaria control. You have the anti-malarial units, you have the mosquito control units, you have some city and county or city and Providence units that are doing mosquito control individually, but nobody talks with each other. We have the Pan-African Mosquito Control Association, which is supposed to help bring everybody together, but that's not worked yet. We have pest control companies that are trying to control mosquitoes in on properties there, but they don't know what the government's doing. The government doesn't know what the private people are doing. And right now it's kind of a mess over there because of that. If we could get everybody to work together, we would have a lot better control of the mosquito. Pest control companies, like private pest control companies, can do a huge service for mosquito control if they knew what the government was planning and worked
Mm,
together rather than against each other.
true.
That's been a big issue we have over there. The National Malaria Control Units, they want to do the malaria control, but they really don't have the resources. The private pest control companies, they have resources, but they don't have the money or the direction on where to go with it. If people started working together, we could start controlling malaria.
Wow. Wow. And that's a really, really good point because we have most of these agencies would need resources. Pest control companies actually even have the resources, but they don't know what exactly is going on and how can we. But based on your own years of experience, what do you think is the way forward right now that can be implemented?
I think right now, especially in Africa and Nigeria and throughout all the countries over there, the private pest control companies need to get involved with the Pest Management Association, the Pan African Mosquito Association. Get involved with them. Start showing the work you guys could do to help. The work throughout the whole country, the whole continent.
Wow.
More, getting together with them is going to be a huge help. Right now, the Pan African Mosquito Association, I don't know how many pest control companies even go to that because people think pest control is not vector control, and
Yeah,
everybody's expecting that mosquitoes should be controlled by the government or
exactly.
NGOs. And
Exactly.
in reality, the pest control companies can have a huge impact on the control of mosquitoes and malaria and all the other diseases that are happening over there.
Mm.
Mosquitoes are the number one killer in the world. And if you've got a few people controlling them throughout the continent, it's not going to have any help. But you have pest control companies over there doing work in all the major cities. Now, if you guys started pitching in and getting some support from the government and taking care of mosquitoes, you'd have a huge army of vector control professionals instead of just hit and miss here and there.
Hmm. Wow. Because a lot of us just focus on and that's the truth because they say that pest control is not vector control and people expect that the government should actually work on vector control whereas the pest control companies they are the best fit for it.
Sure.
That's very true. So I
You
mean,
have the training. You have the training with pesticides. You have the safety training. You know what
wow.
you're looking for. You know how to mix chemicals. You're kind of the army for them. If the government used the pest control professionals, they would be able to control malaria. But right now they're trying to keep the malaria control at the government level instead of at the private level. And
Hmm.
I think the private level is where you're going to need the help over there because there's not enough money at the federal level, at the government level in Africa to take care of all the malaria. Africa is a huge continent, and half of Africa's got a mosquito issue.
Hmm.
Start leveraging the private pest control companies to help with it. That
Hmm.
would be a huge help right there. I think some of the pest control companies, if they get involved with the Pan African Mosquito Association, it would help a little bit. But I think they also need to get involved with their national malaria elimination programs, working together with them if we could show that we could control malaria by controlling the mosquito,
Mhm.
and using pest control professionals, the pest control companies can make some money. The government gets rid of the mosquito, and we start reducing the malaria transmission.
Hmm. This is a very, very good point because over time, I mean, there was a show I had about a few weeks ago that I stated something that we are so much focused on reactive pest management here in Africa, in Nigeria specifically, rather than proactive, because you see the government with, or you see agencies promoting malaria drugs, mosquito nets, rather than actually dealing with the mosquito itself. So the most
Sure.
major focus, they've never focused on larviciding, never focused on adulticiding, but just even if just the point of putting, I did an article, I wrote an article on allowing the governments to look into public health pesticides and saying that let's reduce the cost of public health pesticides, because if you can put a tax waiver on public health pesticides, you have quality products in the country. And in getting quality products is quality solutions that can actually solve major pest problem like vector itself. And there's something that we're looking at. Many pest control operators still rely heavily on spraying, using products, using insecticides, using larvicides. But looking at your own pattern of vector control, it has been extremely different from ArcGIS to surveillance equipment. So what are the innovative equipment or innovative solutions in controlling mosquitoes itself?
Well, there's all kinds of innovative equipments and products out there now. I mean, we'll start with pesticides in general. Right now, Africa imports all their pesticides because not much is manufactured in Africa. But you have BTI right in Africa, a bacteria that'll kill mosquito larvae.
Mhm.
It grows naturally in Africa. If companies there started harvesting that and started producing BTI products, you'd have a BTI product there in Africa instead of bringing it in from Japan or Europe.
Oh, that's Bacillus thuringiensis.
Exactly,
Wow.
BTI.
She's from Africa,
And
really? I've never
it's
thought
originally from
about it.
Israel. It's
Oh,
originally they found it in Israel, which is not too far from Africa, and it is in Africa. Um,
wow.
they, you could isolate it from particles in Africa, if you had the companies there to do it, and you have a lot of smart people in Africa that could take that and create a business, producing BTI right in Africa. It's not been
Wow.
done yet, but it can be done. Start
Wow.
leveraging some of those resources there. Then you get into the equipment side. You've got ULV equipment that sprays for mosquitoes. That's changed a whole lot in the last 100 years. The last 50 years hasn't done a lot of changes, but using ultra low volume pesticides to fog
Mm-hmm.
neighborhoods for mosquitoes. That's one of the new technologies. Drones have been used for surveillance a lot. We started using surveillance drones in about 2016 to try to map mosquito sources.
Wow.
About 2 years later, we started using them to spray for mosquitoes. So areas that you can't get to very easily by foot or by truck or by vehicle, you could get in with a drone. It ends up being a lot cheaper than trying to spray with an airplane or a helicopter. And that's a whole nother technology that's been out. GIS mapping sources, having a good map of where your mosquito sources are in your neighborhoods or in your cities or your states is kind of the foundation of mosquito control. If you don't know where you're going to find the larva, there's no reason sending people out to go take care of them.
Hmm.
So the more you map in a district or the more you map in a city of where the mosquitoes are, the easier it is to send people out to go take care of those. The mapping of mosquito sources in Africa is bare minimum. There's a few universities doing some stuff. There's a few agencies that are doing a little bit of mapping, but it's not anywhere where it needs to be. And I know for a fact that some of the universities there have some very good GIS programs producing some really good GIS technicians that could do that. But it just hasn't really been done yet because right now the government is focusing on bed nets and indoor residual spraying, which doesn't really work. Bed nets was
Exactly.
a big, huge thing that was promoted by the Bill Gates Foundation. Let's put bed nets over the top of everybody's beds and keep people from being bit at night, to help slow the spread of malaria. Well, the issue is the mosquito that's biting people, causing the malaria, aren't flying around in the middle of the night to bite you to give you malaria. They're in the daytime. People are not using the bed nets to sleep under. They're using them to go fish because they need food. Right now, the
Hmm.
priority for most Africans, they would like food. Food and water is a
Exactly.
huge thing. So I spend a lot of time in Tanzania and Kenya and Nigeria, and you drive down the road and you'll see fish. You'll see the bed nets in the rivers to catch
Hmm.
fish. They're creating these really neat nets to catch food, but they're forgetting that actually they don't even know that those bed nets are impregnated with permethrin, which kills fish. So
Wow.
you put those bed nets in the river, you're putting permethrin in the river, and you're killing the baby fish. So you're not helping yourself by using the bed nets for fishing nets. It's killing off your food source. And I think a lot of the people over there aren't educated in that they don't know that they're killing fish by doing that because nobody's telling them this. So then we go into the education side of integrated stuff or innovative stuff. Is we need to start educating people over there about everything. The bed nets, don't use the bed nets in the water. Cover up when you're outside for mosquitoes. If you got standing water, let's try to drain it or divert it. Things like that.
Hmm.
So that's
There's so much to do about mosquito control and even pest management itself. I feel that, and over the years, I mean, that I've started the pest control industry, I've focused on the part of client education because that's the only way to communicate effective solution. That's the only way to solve pest problem. You would have some cases whereby the client is actually saying, "No, I'm seeing bed bugs, I'm seeing roaches." But whereas all they are probably having is just what they call this thing, maybe just the fear of the mind or just is it trauma? They're having just trauma and they don't even know that, okay, this is how to spot them. These are evidence of how to identify these things that are causing them to breed in my area and stuff like that. So there's so much to
sure.
do in terms of education because that's the beginning of solving the pest problem itself. You mentioned something and I saw in one of the article by pestregister.com where they posted that your company is actually the individual company specialized in drones capable of spraying and also spraying pesticides or granular insecticides. I mean, I'm just so curious. I'm sure that people are also going to be wondering how does it actually even work? How does the drones help in solving this mosquito problem? How does it work effectively? And you also mentioned about ArcGIS. Some people are going to be wondering what exactly is the word GIS itself, right?
Sure.
Like you said, Nigeria is not we're not so much good at this mapping thing, right? So I would want us to
They're,
like
they're
also
good.
talk
They're
about that
good at
more.
it. They just haven't used it yet. So drones, um, for mosquito control or vector control in general, I guess there's the two sides of it. One is the surveillance, where you're mapping out the water sources. Everybody knows mosquitoes come from water. So if you have a
Exactly.
water source, you have a potential for mosquitoes. And without water, you're not going to have mosquitoes. So mapping the water source is a huge thing with drones because you could get very high detail, down to like center accuracy with a resolution. That's the first thing is using it for mapping and getting high resolution areas. Getting behind some of those trees you can't see from the ground. You'll see ponds back there you don't know about. And the second thing
Wow.
is using them for spraying. So with spraying, there's two different avenues. One is adulticiding and one is larviciding. So with the larviciding, we're putting stuff in the water. So with the drones, we have ways to put granular and liquid materials into the water. Right now, we're using BTI, Bacillus thuringiensis, and we're spraying that into the water. So if you get out to a spot in the middle of a field that you can't walk or it takes you 2 hours to treat it by foot, something that treats by ground in 2 hours, you could have done in 15 minutes with a drone. So you're able to spray a whole lot more in the daytime, for mosquito larvae, with a drone than you could by ground. And then, especially in the heat of Africa,
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge help. Trying to work in the heat, it's hard, and so drones do help. The problem is that you really can't do mosquito control with a drone until you learn how to do mosquito control on the ground. So
Hmm.
a pest control company or a government that says, "Hey, I'm going to start doing mosquito control," the ones that buy a drone, their first piece of equipment, they're the ones that are going to fail because they don't know how to do the basics of mosquito control or mosquito surveillance.
Hmm.
And we've seen that even here in America. There'll be governments that say, "Hey, we want to do mosquito control. Let's go buy a drone," and they'll spend $60,000 on a drone, and the drone will sit in the garage forever because they don't know how to use it. They don't know how to do mosquito control in general.
Hmm.
The other part of the spray drones is the ULV or the fogging side of it. You know, when you're seeing people with fogging with the ground equipment, you could do the same thing with a drone. We treat about 50 hectares a flight, which is, a pretty good area when you're ULV fogging with the drone. So the drones do help. They do a really good job at controlling mosquitoes, but you have to have those basics first. And I tell everybody that wants to get into drone spraying for mosquitoes, first learn how to control mosquitoes by ground.
Hmm.
Know
So
how to mix chemicals.
great. So I mean, I think you only want to answer that question because I was going to ask that how exactly you're talking about people understanding the basics. So how exactly is even the basics? What exactly is the basics for someone
Well,
who
the
is wanting?
basics.
Yes.
Yeah, the basics, surveillance, knowing what the mosquito source is. You can't
Hmm.
treat a pest unless you know what the pest is. Same thing with mosquitoes.
Exactly.
There's hundreds of species of mosquitoes, and you just can't treat every single piece of water out there because not every single piece of water is going to have mosquitoes. So you need to identify those mosquitoes first.
Hmm.
Just because there's a pond out by the street doesn't mean there's mosquitoes growing in it. It could, but doesn't always. And if you're treating every spot of water on the ground, you will never have enough chemicals or BTI or anything to treat for what you need to take care of. So you need to identify that source first. Um, I've been into Africa, and there's a lot of water, especially in the rainy season. There's water all over, and if you treated
Exactly.
all that water, you would never have enough chemicals. So the thing isn't to spray all of the water; it's to spray the water that has mosquitoes. So
Hmm.
that's the first part of it. And it comes back to that whole IPM, integrated pest management. You're first got to find that source. If you don't have a source, you can spray all you want. You'll never get rid of the mosquitoes. It's kind of like indoor residual spraying. We're spraying just the inside of a building, but you're not taking care of that source, so they're going to keep coming in.
Hmm. Hmm. That's very, very important. Understanding the source, proper identification. Those are critical things. There's a particular device I saw that I think you talked about it at the American Mosquito Control Society Association um annual 84th or 85th annual event. That's the SUAVS. They are used for mosquito surveillance, source surveillance, larviciding, and ULV adulticiding. And I think that's the only site I saw that particular device. I tried searching, doing my research to see if what exactly does this equipment looks like? What's the name of this equipment? What's the full meaning of the acronym that we have? So I want you to
Oh,
actually delve
so
into that. Yeah.
yeah, so the acronym you're getting there is SUAS or
Yes.
SUAV. So in America, in particular, there's two categories of drones. You have large drones and you have small drones. That S in front of that means small, so it means under 55 pounds.
Oh.
Those requirements are completely different in other countries. So in America, we use either a large UAS or a small UAS when we're talking about drones. And there are two different categories of licensing through our local government or our federal government. So a SUAS is a small unmanned aerial system, so something under 55 pounds. And typically that's what I stick with because it's a lot easier to carry around a 55-pound drone than to carry around a 100-pound drone.
Wow.
So that's what that comes from. So we're focusing on using small UASs with Three Rivers just because it's a lot easier to manage and a lot less regulatory issues with licensing and with the federal aviation, and that's what that's for. And we do have one large UAS, and it's a lot more regulatory issues, a lot heavier to carry around. In my opinion, for what we do, we don't need a large UAS. If I had more people to work and more people carrying stuff around, potentially, but for the amount that it puts out and how much it weighs, it doesn't really add up financially for us.
Hmm.
If that makes sense to you.
Yes, 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 it does. It does actually.
Because you
So,
can only you're with drones you're limited to batteries, so you
oh,
could only you could only fly the drone as much as the battery will let you. And
oh,
so if you have a battery that lasts for 12 minutes, you shouldn't be carrying any more pesticides than you could put out in 12 minutes. And so a 100-pound drone still only flies for 12 minutes. If you
mm,
can't put out 100 pounds worth of chemicals, then it's for me it's just too much drone. Typically, you're putting out about 10 pounds per acre if you're using BTI, which is 20 pounds for every 2 acres, and that does pretty well with that 12-minute flight. If I added another 40 pounds of chemicals in there, I still only have 12 minutes to put that out, and for
mm,
me, it doesn't make sense. Other
mm.
people, it works fine for, but for us, it doesn't seem to work very well.
Wow. So, in terms of control, you talked about products, products. You're just mentioning products, but there is something that is way important when it comes to pesticides or product choice. You've talked about BTIs, but there is still the most common one, especially in Nigeria here. Everybody is used to pesticides, insecticides.
Hmm.
So, and
Hmm.
in that case, there is a focus on the active ingredients of the insecticides. So, what is the major active ingredient that is best used when it comes to mosquito vector control in general? We've heard of microencapsulated pesticides. They are good for IRS. What are other ones are really, really perfect for mosquito control?
Well, and that's going to depend on what you're treating. So
Mm,
if you're treating larvae, if you're treating adults, some species are more affected by different pesticides in the larval or the adult stage. All of that's going to come back to what you have to treat, where you have to treat, and how big of areas you have to do. They have BTIs and BSs, which are bacterial or natural Rs that are natural pesticides. Those are always, in my opinion, best for treating larvae because of the fact that it's not affecting other organisms. You have insect growth regulators such as methoprene that affect the mosquito larvae from turning into an adult.
yeah.
They're a little bit more expensive, and so I don't think you see it as much over in Africa.
Way
Um, it's
expensive.
it's very expensive. Yeah, and growth regulators are something that local universities and companies there could create locally and bring those costs down. But even for us in the United States, insect growth regulators are expensive. And when we put chemicals out, we also look at the cost per how well it does, and we use a lot of insect growth regulators in places we want it to last long because it makes sense financially. You
Mm,
got the adulticides. People are using pyrethroids and organophosphates, and that would be a whole show in itself about different pesticides for adulticiding. I know for decades and decades they use DDT in certain places in Africa. They're still using DDT,
true, but it has been
which
banned actually.
it's been banned, but it's
Yes.
still being used. Um, it's yeah, it's banned, but it still could be used, or it still is being used. There are companies over there that are using used engine oil to spray on water because it will kill mosquito larvae. It will
Mm.
kill the environment too, but it kills mosquito larvae. So people are doing that. There are
Sorry, you said
new
engine oil.
engine oil.
Okay, tell me more.
which
How
is
does that work?
please do not use engine oil to control mosquitoes.
Oh, wait.
But there are companies over there that I know go
Wow.
get used engine oil and they spray on the puddles of water to control mosquitoes because it
Wow.
kills the larva. That's very, very bad. It's a
Wow.
bad. You're doing bad for the world. Um,
Exactly.
but there are there's alternatives to that. That's like a 18th century type of thing of let's put oil on water to kill mosquitoes. Um, there are all kinds of new products out there that do the same thing that is not bad for the world. Mineral oils and
There's even this silicone-based
yeah,
liquid
yep,
film.
silicone. Yep. There's one out of a friend of mine out of Italy produces it and he sells it all over Africa to people who want to use it. So there's all kinds of stuff that you could use it that's not bad for the environment. So
Wow.
yeah, but there are people that still
Amazing.
do stuff like that, and it's
Right.
because they're not educated. I think a lot of people do not know the harm that they could be causing
Exactly.
with things like that. And I think a huge thing that would be very helpful over there is educate people. I mean, with that whole IPM ideas, integrated pest management starts with identifying the pest and then education. Because if you could get rid of a pest with just educating somebody, like you said about bed bugs, you don't need to use pesticides. If
Exactly.
if you could help drain some areas that are growing mosquitoes, you wouldn't need pesticides. There is a hospital in Nigeria that they're growing mosquitoes under the hospital in the tunnels
Hmm?
because they're flooded with water. Drain that and you get rid of the mosquitoes.
Hmm.
Education, letting people know, what they can do to help themselves. Landowners or cities or governments or universities, they need to pitch in too. So education is going to be key with them.
Wow. So it sounds like you've actually stayed for long in Nigeria. So when you came to Nigeria, how long did you stay?
I've been there a few times in a few weeks each time.
Wow.
In Nigeria in particular, I was working with the University of Port Harcourt, working on malaria stuff. And so
Wow.
typically we go over there around World Malaria Day and try to help educate. So the last time I was over there was right around COVID time, and so we were trying to educate, or we were trying to create this training program for locals to know what to do for mosquito control in general. There's not a lot of regulatory help or rules to follow or SOPs, standard operating procedures for mosquito control. So we're trying to create that over there. And,
Hmm.
and my goal was to start with the University of Port Harcourt and get the faculty and staff there to understand mosquito control and what is a good way to do it and try to broadcast out from there. So try to do a program there that would then work everywhere else. It's kind
Wow.
of slowed down because of COVID. We a lot of travel stopped, and then
Yeah.
this year with political unrest, we didn't do much this year. I would like to get back over and start back with it. We keep in touch with the provost over there, who is kind of in charge of that. Part of that is with the National Malaria Elimination Program
Okay.
and the Center for Malaria Research and Phytomedicine. They
Wow.
all want to get stuff going, but it's hard with getting a lot of organizations together.
Hmm.
And I would like to get back over there and start doing that. And that's what you and I had talked about,
Yeah.
training, getting people standardized on what to do for mosquito control. Um, that's
Exactly.
my that's my goal. Is in reality, most of the people that are trying to do some work over in Africa have very good intentions, but just don't
Mhm.
have the resources or the background on the best way to do things. So the best practices for mosquito control. You know,
Exactly. I think
we need to
there's
get some standardization over there, and it's doable. It really is. It's just getting everybody on the same boat, listening to the same directions, and following the same rules.
Mm.
That's where it's going to start. And I don't know how to start it. I was thinking through the University of Port Harcourt was a good spot to start. I think it is. And getting the local or the government of Nigeria starting with it. That's a
Mm-hmm.
good place to start. Um,
Mm-hmm. I
but
think,
but there's
yeah.
yeah.
I think there's still so much that needs to be done in terms of collaboration and getting the government support because in as much as individuals want to do the work, putting their best foot forward, there's still always like stumbling blocks, and stumbling blocks are authorities, regulatory bodies, governmental agencies, and that's exactly what we're doing with Pest Insights Initiative, which is basically educating people, creating that awareness. But the thing is, we're not just doing it alone. We're also trying to get collaborations with all the possible regulatory bodies, Nigeria, National Malaria Elimination Program, LASEPA, all the environmental agencies, including ECON, PECAN, and so many other agencies like that to get that collaboration to make this work out because that's the only way we can have a collaborative workforce and a proper solution. And you have great intention in solving major problem here in Africa. And it can't be done alone. It has to be with in collaborations. Just as where we started, we talked about different agencies are doing their thing and there is a need for that collaborative body. And speaking about collaboration and latest innovation, the Bill Gates Foundation posted something recently, which is I think about 2025, which is talked about mosquito control and genetically modified mosquitoes in solving mosquitoes itself. And this was researched by the Imperial College London, using European bees and the Australian class, African class claw frogs, mixing their genes together to create that genetically modified mosquitoes. So how does that work? Do you believe really in that kind of system in solving the mosquito problem? And what's the state right now? Because the last time I saw it is basically in terms they're still on the research study, not yet fully out. So what's your take on that, sir?
So I guess there's a couple different avenues there. One is the genetically modified mosquitoes, and then the other is the irradiated mosquitoes, the sterile insect mosquitoes. And so there's two different ways of doing that. And there's it's it's a really good idea. I think creating a way to self-regulate mosquitoes is a good thought. I don't know if it's what we need to be doing right now.
Mm.
Personally, there's movies out there about genetically modifying things, dinosaurs, and they come back and
And they
ruin the world.
rule the world.
So I don't know. I don't have a personal opinion on it. Although I don't think we're God. You know,
Mm.
I think we need to be careful.
I like that. I like that summary. It's like in quotes, we're not God.
We're not God. So I think I worry about it, especially
Mm.
genetically modified. You modify genes in anything, you have a different product at the end. I mean, even humans, we
Mm.
slowly modify ourselves over millions of years, and things change. And animals, the same thing. And I don't know. So I don't really have a personal opinion on the genetically modified. The sterile insects, on the other hand, I'm a little bit more secure with them because you're not really changing their genetic makeup. You're just putting out sterile male mosquitoes and hoping that
Mm.
you're going to have less mosquitoes in the long run. I think those are all great ideas, but it's one of those things that never ends. The,
Mm.
I'm kind of I'm kind of back and forth on this. My thought on this is we're not God. We can't really change things like that, but there's things that we can do. We can change the way people are. We can change behavior of people. Start using those bed nets for other
That's
things
true.
besides fishing. We could start working on mosquito source reduction. We could do larviciding. One of the projects I've thought about for decades now is they've got millions of those bed nets out there, and people are picking them up at their local refuge spot, to go put in their house instead of using for fishing. Let's create window screens for them instead. Put screens on the door,
Oh,
screens on the doors, and screens on the windows, so that you could keep your windows open and keep the mosquitoes out rather than trying to keep them off your bed. You keep them out of your house in general. I have mulled around this quite a bit, thinking how can you create this program over there to help people screen their houses in. In America, we used to have malaria. In the 1930s, malaria was a huge killer over here. Malaria was eliminated in the 1940s because of mosquito control, indoor or air conditioning, and screens on doors. We were able to get rid of malaria. If we did the same thing in Africa, it's not an overnight fix. It's going to be a social change and getting people to start doing things themselves, but start putting screens on doors so that you're not having mosquitoes come into your house during the day and night. That's a huge start. If Bill Gates is going to give a million bed nets out, start using them on houses, and stop putting them in the water.
amazing. That's a different way of looking at it. Because honestly speaking, I feel like if you can keep them out, they would not find their way in. And they just like the resting spots. They just have resting spots. So at the moment you open your door is when they come in. So they don't even breathe inside, they breathe outside. So why don't you just find a way to actually keep them outside?
Keep them outside and get rid of the breeding sources, and you'll start eliminating the mosquito. You get rid of the mosquito, the malaria goes away. It's going to take education. It's going to take coordination between everybody. It's going to take all of the units that are involved to stop thinking that they're the ones that they're the only correct ones, because you get all of these agencies and they all think that their way is the only way. And when you talk to people at the federal government, like if you go to the federal government in Nigeria, it's their way or no way. If you go to the malaria elimination program for Nigeria, there's the only way to do it. They don't think that there's other ways to fix the problem, and I think that's our problem, is that a lot of these agencies have good intentions, but their way is the only way, and a lot of people, they want to be the boss, and you got the National Malaria Elimination Program. They want to be the boss of this, and the federal government wants to be the boss of this, and the Pan-African Mosquito Association, they want to be the boss of it. You can't have bosses. You can't have 15 bosses and not get the work done. There needs to be a lot more coordination and funneling of those efforts, because right now there's nobody over there that says what to do to get rid of malaria, because everybody has a different idea. And they're pushing for the vaccines now, the new malaria vaccines.
Yeah.
So we'll stop malaria at the person, but malaria is still there. So the first person that doesn't have that is going to start getting it again. Why don't we work on the source and get rid of the malaria? Get rid of the problem. It's doable. It's been done throughout the world. I mean, there's countries that have had malaria for hundreds of years and they don't have it anymore. So we could do the same thing. It's just going to take a lot of work, a lot of coordination, a lot of collaboration, and then one agency to take over the work that then tells the other agencies what to do, instead of everybody telling each other what to do and nothing getting done. That's been my frustration with it, because you'll have one agency wants to do it one way, and they're the boss, and they have to have their name on the paper, and they have to have their name on their solution. I half jokingly told the president of Nigeria 8 or 9 years ago, I can't remember which one it was back then, told him, hey, listen, let's get rid of malaria, and you could be the person in charge that proved that we got rid of malaria, and we'll put a statue of you out there. And he was all for it.
Wow.
I think if we get some better structure going over there, and then start bringing in the pest control companies to help out and say, hey, do you want to come over and help us work in Lagos? We need people working on the north side of Lagos. Here's the areas we need you to start looking at. It ends up being cheaper in the long run. We get a lot more people working out there. We don't have a whole lot of overpaid bosses, and get stuff done. Start getting some funding going towards the pest control companies. Start getting rid of the malaria. in my opinion, I feel sometimes, for 20 years now, we've heard about malaria, and every year they're like, we're going to get rid of malaria in 2012. We're going to get rid of malaria in 2018. We're going to get rid of malaria in
Exactly.
2020. We're going to get rid of malaria in 2026. Every
This time
year,
around, it's 2030.
yeah, it's like every couple of years is like no more malaria by 2024. No, so if we're going to say no more malaria by 2020 by 2030, then let's come up with a plan of no malaria by 2030. And on paper it looks great. Yes, let's but you have to have a plan that's actually sustainable and achievable. To me, they have an idea. They have, great idea. Let's get rid of malaria by 2030. Fine. Let's give us a goal of getting rid of that. But we need to have some plans on what to do that, because bringing bed nets in every week to different neighborhoods is not going to get rid of it. We've proved it. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results.
Exactly.
Putting bed nets out every day. So in 2009 or 10, I was in Nepal, Nepal. I go to so many places. I was in Tanzania and I got malaria. And I came back to the United States to be treated because I didn't want to be treated at the hospital there. I just,
Wow.
I just knew that if I went back to the States, I'd get better care. Ever since then, I'm like, people can't live with malaria. We have to get rid of it. It's not good. I don't know if you've had it before, but it's not. It's horrible, and I can't imagine living knowing that your child is gonna could potentially die from it, or your grandchild is gonna potentially die because nobody. You know somebody close to you that's had malaria and died, right?
Me, not really, but I've not experienced someone close to me. But the funniest thing is that someone has said something on the show, on this PestXperience show before, and said that most people has actually died from malaria unknowingly because we don't even have data of the cause of death of some other people. Yeah. So you can actually hear somebody who sleeps and wakes up today just saying, "Oh, I have this high temperature, I have this summer feeling," but they don't even know it's actually malaria that killed the person because we don't even have the data that confirms the cause of death of most people, and that's the fact. And that's the fact.
Yeah.
So speaking about this, okay, you want to say something, Victor?
I was going to say, because when I was over there, we were talking with some of the professors, and there's been talk that everybody in Africa knows somebody who has died of malaria, or at least somebody in their family has died from malaria. That everybody it may not know that they actually died from malaria, but somebody died and it was because of malaria or a complication of the malaria, and that's not good.
Exactly.
Let's get rid of it and come up with a plan and get people involved in doing it. I think the first thing is getting rid of 15 bosses and putting it under one agency, and I think it should be somewhere that's not a government agency. I think somebody like like a university's department should be in charge of the program and delegate out to people what to do. You get the federal government involved, and there becomes a lot more problems.
True. So, what exactly do you think is the future of mosquito control or vector management itself?
The future of in Africa or in general?
In Africa, starting forward, we face a lot here.
I think the future of vector control in Africa. I think we're going to be spinning our wheels until we have some standard operating procedures in place. Until people start doing the same thing throughout the country, that's a good thing. Not just using bed nets. I think we need to go away from using bed nets. Put that money from bed nets into education and source reduction. There's no reason to keep producing bed nets and funding a Japanese chemical company. Or the hope that a mosquito is going to touch that bed net and help. I think we need to go away from that thought process, more education, more source reduction, get rid of the mosquito sources. Why keep spraying indoors if the mosquitoes are going to keep coming back? It's kind of ridiculous. kind of ridiculous. I've gone into some of the hospitals there, and they smell so badly of chemicals because they've put chemicals in the hospital for so long that can't be good for you. Um,
Hmm.
I think creating a program that's focusing on getting rid of malaria without the financial benefits. So a lot of these federal agencies are getting funded to help with malaria, but all the money's not going to malaria control. It's going into pockets of politicians.
Hmm.
Um, we need to get rid of that.
That's
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 that's our.
that's the
But
sincere truth.
and I don't want to say it being disrespectful, but it's true.
That's the
There's a lot
truth.
of money going into people's pockets that shouldn't be going into.
Hmm.
Um, and so how do you fix that? I don't. It's not an overnight thing. I think it's going to be a huge educational program to push out more, letting people know what to do themselves,
Hmm.
and try to focus that money onto things that actually do good, instead of the things that are not helping yet. You can only do bed nets for so long before you finally say, "Hey, they're not working." So
That's
that's my thought on that.
that's great. And there's so much that needs to be done in terms of the governmental collaboration and making sure that they do the right thing and keeping in check. You mentioned something which is basically having a private organization do this thing rather than focusing on governmental agencies or other agencies to solving this problem. I think that's a very good way to start with. And
I think you create your own thing, and if it's using an existing agency to help, like the Pan African Mosquito Association, I think would be a great place to start, with education of this stuff. I just think that they haven't been directed in the right direction yet, because I don't see a lot of progress with them right now. The Pan African Mosquito Association started in 2009,
mhm,
and they don't have a lot of direction yet.
membership. Okay.
I think there's too much of the people wanting to be bosses, and I don't mean to be mean like that, but everybody wants to be a boss, and not everybody could be a boss. Does that
Hmm.
make sense what I'm saying to you?
Exactly.
Everybody wants to be in charge of something, but if you have everybody in charge, you have nobody doing the work.
Exactly.
Um,
Everybody wants to get the title, but nobody's doing the work of the title.
yeah.
Uh,
And everybody goes to college, they want to be a doctor or a lawyer or something, but not everybody could
mm,
be a doctor.
mm,
Um, I think pest control and vector control and IPM needs to be brought up in status over there. I think people in the United States too. So most people, when they think of a pest control person, they think of, um, arachnophobia. Did you ever see the American movie Arachnophobia, where this guy sprays for spiders, and he's just kind of a hillbilly, kind of,
I
just
don't
a
know.
stupid guy, and
I
they
don't think
and
I've
people
watched.
think pest control people, huh?
I've not watched
It's
it.
it's You'll have to watch it. It's kind of a funny movie. But
Okay.
so people think pest control is this job for like peasants, that you can't really do good in your career and raise a family as pest control, because people think of it as this low-lying job, but it really isn't. Um, it's a huge career that you can make a lot of money, you can do a lot of good, and and it's needed. Everybody dies from something, and the majority of people in the world die from something related to a vector. Like
Mm-hmm.
uh, malaria, or you get sick from food in a restaurant, but that was because a fly landed on the food that had landed in some feces
True.
outside. So everything, a huge issue in the world is people dying from vector-borne diseases, and
Mm.
pest control is what is used to control that. It's not, vaccines are fine for certain things, but without a vector control in general, communities go away. And you're in a job as a pest control person, you go into a restaurant, you got cockroaches. Cockroaches spread disease,
Mm,
and bed bugs cause infections, and people forget about that. And if we get more people involved in pest control, get educated, and realize it's not this lonely job, but it's a job that's a professional, and that it's somebody who's been trained and licensed and educated, and you know a lot more about termites than I do. I don't know much about termites, but a termite will destroy people's houses, and
true.
and 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 you could lose everything you invested in your house in a termite. Same thing with cockroaches. You get your house infested with cockroaches, your house has to be burned down because you can't live with cockroaches because the diseases they transmit and they carry around.
Mm-hmm.
If we get more people involved in pest control, saying, "Hey, this is a career that could do good." I mean, I won't say how much money I make, but I do really well with just focusing on mosquitoes. Um,
Wow.
and so
Wow.
I've talked to the schools, and the schools like University of Port Harcourt, has talked about putting IPM programs in where somebody comes into school instead of learning to be a physician or to be a doctor or to be a geologist or whatever else, come in and learn IPM and how to effectively control mosquitoes or control ticks or control things like that. Um, because you know doctors are important, but not everybody could be a doctor. Um,
Exactly, exactly. And that's very much important. And that's what we're doing with the Pest Insights Apprenticeship program. We talked about this, which is basically creating more workforce in the
mhm,
industry because the industry is a very large one, and you need more people, you need more workforce. We need more
sure,
people, and not just people, we need people who are also experienced, who understand how to solve this pest problem and creating environmental solutions into the world in a global scale. That's the focus of the apprenticeship program. I mean, we don't want to have people who are graduates, but they're not graduating to something. We want people who are graduates,
sure,
but eventually, even after school, they have a clear definition of solving real problems. And I started when I was in school, so I really believe that we can actually bring more people to start their career in that line. I have young minds working with me that started as undergraduates when they are schools, and now they're serving and they're working full time with me right now. So it shows that we have more people. We have more people who can do the job, and
sure.
we can actually collaborate to make and solve real time problem in the industry and create a career and create a beautiful life out of this. And well, that's a very very good way to wrap up. But I would want you to add few things if you want to add few things
Sure.
before we wrap up the show. Although I have like two questions to ask. Let me first start. The first one, I'll just combine the two together. Which is what exactly is the best climate change how exactly is climate change affecting vector control? Most times they said the wind, you don't have mosquitoes flying during the wind season, the wind during the wind time. There are times where you have to start watching out for mosquito, the weather seasons, the climate change, how is it affecting mosquito control? Then the second question is, what exactly should pest control operators be looking forward to in terms of solving mosquito problem? Is it the larva? Is it the pupa? Is it the adult stage of mosquito? What should be the major focus? Then you can now wrap up that way.
Sure. Sure. So with weather change or climate change, or um, that's having a huge impact on mosquitoes, and ironically, it's going a different direction than you would think. So right now, and I'll just use the United States for example because I'm focusing on that right now with my work. The West Coast has been very very dry this year. Typically, we have about 6 feet of snow. This year we
Mm.
don't have any snow. The snow in the mountains is very small, so we have very little snow in the hills. When that melts off, in a normal year, when that melts off, it floods the rivers. The rivers overflow, cause these big pools, and have huge amounts of water. This year we didn't have that, so we don't have the snow up in the mountains, so we're not going to probably have that flooding. But what we did have is a lot more mosquitoes overwintering during the winter as adults, and so last month we had more people calling about mosquitoes flying around. than normal this time of the year because the weather hasn't been the wet. So we're not going to probably have the huge hatch offs in the spring, but we have a lot of overwintering adults because they didn't freeze off. I think throughout the whole world, things warming up, mosquitoes are starting to migrate towards the warmer weather. We have a lot of Aedes aegypti and Aedes albopictus that are going north in the United States. They didn't used to be in the United States at all, and they've slowly migrated here. I think we're seeing over in Africa a lot more mosquitoes because we've had a lot more wet seasons down in the central part, but not as wet north from what I've heard. And so I don't know how that's going to affect the mosquitoes. We need water for mosquitoes. So if we never get water again, eventually these mosquitoes kind of go away.
Mm.
I don't think I don't think I think the world we're not going into some big lack of water season. I think the world has had these evolutionary changes and the climate has changed over thousands and millions of years and we're just in that little section right now that's drying up in certain spots and getting more wet in certain spots. And I think it's just going to move where the mosquitoes are. I don't see us having a huge impact on like malaria. I don't think that the little bit less or a little bit more water this year is going to have any effect on the malaria because I think we're just not going to see that in our time. I think maybe in the next 100 years you'll see changes, but in my life, it's not going to change a whole lot.
Mm.
We'll see a little bit more mosquitoes migrating out from those areas that have normally had them. And I feel like I'm talking in a circle with this because it kind of is a circle. Like I
Sure.
said earlier, we're not God. We can't really change things being God. Same thing with mosquitoes. We
Oh,
can't say when they're going to be here, and I could probably argue both sides of that with weather change. I could probably give you a very very strong argument about why the mosquitoes are going to be worse this year here, and I could give you the same exact argument about why the mosquitoes are not going to be worse here this year.
mm.
I don't want to act like God and say that we know how things are going to be. I just think that we are going to have here because of the snow melt, this one season of having smaller snows, smaller levels of snow. We're not going to have as much of a heavy hatch off in the spring. But I think throughout the year, we'll probably have the same amount. We'll just see mosquitoes come in a little bit later. And hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah.
What was your other question?
The other question was like, what should heavy pest control operator look out for? Is it the larva? Is it the adult or the pupa stage of mosquito?
So the easiest way to control anything is when you could get to them, right? So if
Mm.
you have cockroaches and you find a cockroach carrying its egg sac around, if you kill that cockroach in the egg sac, it's done, right? You're not going to have to worry about it running off. So it's always best to get rid of them at the beginning source. Larva is the easiest time to get rid of them because they're all isolated to that little spot. Pupa is a little bit more difficult because you can only use surfactants like the oils to kill them, so it's a little bit harder to kill
Mm.
pupa. It's always easier to go for a larva. It's even easier to go after them if you could dry out the area. So if it's a little wetland that's growing mosquitoes that shouldn't be wet because somehow somebody put a road in and blocked up the water flow, get rid of that, and then you don't have to worry about larvae, eggs, or adults. Um, Larva is always the easiest, but even more easy than that is just not having them. So get rid of the source.
Great, great. That's a very great point. Usually I would say that treat from the source. For any pest control treatment, basically focus on the source. Where exactly are they breeding from, and get rid of
Yeah.
those things. And I think that's
It's
that's
easy to take. Well, it's easy to take care of them when they're in your bedroom, but if you let them out of your bedroom and they're going through the whole town, how do you get rid of them? You
exactly.
you can't.
Exactly. So thank you very much, Mr. Edward, all the way from the United States of America, right on the Pest Experience Show here in Nigeria. And I'm super, super glad there's so much we've talked about in terms of collaboration, working together, solving the problem, creating more workforce, and not so many other things like that. It's been a wonderful time hearing and sharing your own wonderful experience with the global audience of the Pest Experience Show. And thank you very much. Is there anything you want to add up
No,
before we go?
I did want to add just a quick thing. people who want to get into pest control or vector control, get out and experience other agencies. Go out and see how people are doing things like you.
Great. That's a very good one. Thank you very much. Exploring other states is quite important, and seeing how it works in other states is critical. And thank you very much. Thank you very much for sharing your experience on the Pest Experience Show. And this is the Pest Experience Show. I see you 7 to 8 p.m. West African time every Sunday. I'll see you on the next episode of Pest Experience Show.
Thank you.